The night sky above the alien desert was full of strange stars. The air was heavy, glowing with two moons that gave the land a silver shine. A lone human named Daniel walked carefully through the sand. His ship had crashed hours ago, and he had no way to call for help. His legs were tired, and his heart was heavy, but his eyes were sharp, always searching for danger. Then, far in the distance, Daniel saw fire. Not the fire of a crash, but the fire of battle. Sparks flew into the sky, and shadows moved quickly. He heard the sharp sound of alien weapons and the desperate cry of someone in fear. Daniel did not stop to think. His body moved on its own. He ran toward the light, his boots striking the sand. When he reached the top of a dune, the sight froze him in place. An alien royal carriage, glowing gold and carried by strange beasts, was under attack. Armored raiders surrounded it, their faces hidden behind masks. Inside the carriage was a young alien girl, her skin a soft shade of lavender, her eyes glowing like jewels. Her clothing was delicate, decorated with silver lines that looked like stars in motion. She was no ordinary girl. She was a princess. The raiders pulled at the carriage doors, shouting in a language Daniel could not fully understand. But he understood one thing clearly. They wanted her. The guards of the carriage were already down, defeated by the attackers. Only the princess remained, her voice shaking with fear. Daniel had a choice: walk away and survive, or fight for someone he had never met. His heart decided before his mind could. Daniel rushed forward, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon. The weapon was strange, glowing blue along the edges, but it felt natural in his hands. The raiders turned in surprise, their eyes glowing through their masks. A human here on their world, it was unthinkable. Daniel did not care. He fired the weapon, and a blast of light struck one raider down. The others charged at him, their screams echoing in the desert night. The fight was brutal. Daniel moved with speed. Every strike of his weapon was guided by instinct. The raiders were skilled, but they were not ready for a human who had nothing to lose. Sand kicked up around them as they clashed, the sound of energy blades cutting the night air. One by one, the raiders fell, until only silence remained. Daniel stood, breathing hard, sweat running down his face. The princess stared at him through the half-broken door of the carriage. Her eyes were wide with shock, but also filled with something else, hope. For a moment, she did not move, then slowly she stepped out. Her voice was soft but clear. "You saved me." Daniel nodded, not knowing what to say. The language barrier was strong, but in that moment, words were not needed. The princess reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his arm. Her skin was warm, her eyes shimmering under the moonlight. In that single touch, Daniel felt a strange connection. It was as if destiny itself had brought him here. He looked around at the fallen raiders, wondering why they wanted her, and why the universe had chosen him to be part of this night. The sound of distant horns broke the silence. More soldiers were coming, but these were not raiders. From the darkness, riders appeared, carrying banners of gold. They surrounded the carriage, and one of them shouted in the alien tongue. The princess lifted her hand and spoke quickly, pointing at Daniel. The soldiers looked at him with disbelief, their faces tense and full of questions. Daniel did not understand their words, but he understood their eyes. They were not sure if he was friend or enemy. The princess stepped forward, standing between him and the soldiers. Her voice was strong now, full of command. She pointed at him and spoke with a tone that left no doubt. She was protecting him, just as he had protected her. The leader of the soldiers finally nodded. He signaled for them to lower their weapons. The princess looked back at Daniel with a small smile, a smile that carried both gratitude and mystery. He had saved her life, but something told him this was only the beginning. Far above them, the two moons glowed brighter, as if the universe was watching closely. And in Daniel's heart, he felt a storm of questions rising. Who was this princess? Why was she attacked? And what destiny now waited for him in this alien world? Daniel followed the alien princess into the golden palace, his boots echoing against the polished floor. The walls glowed faintly, covered with carvings that looked alive. Stars, moons, and strange symbols moved as if breathing. It felt less like stone and more like the inside of a living creature. The soldiers around him kept their weapons close, their eyes sharp, never trusting him completely. The princess walked with quiet grace, her head held high, even though her people whispered behind her. She wore a robe now, deep violet with silver threads, and every step made the light shimmer across the fabric. Her guards bowed as she passed, but when their eyes met Daniel, they frowned, their faces tight with suspicion. The words on their lips were strange, but Daniel could feel the meaning. He was an outsider, not welcome here. At last, the princess stopped before a massive golden door. It opened with a deep sound, and inside was a throne hall brighter than the stars outside. At the far end sat the alien king, his body tall and powerful, his crown made of burning jewels. His skin was darker lavender than his daughter's, his eyes cold yet full of authority. When he saw Daniel, he leaned forward, his voice a thunder that filled the hall. "Human," the princess whispered beside him, translating in broken words, "This is my father, the king." Daniel bowed his head, not knowing what else to do. The king's gaze pierced him like fire, his hand gripping the armrest of his throne. Whispers spread across the hall, aliens muttering in disbelief. Some called him dangerous, some called him blessed, some said the word prophecy, though Daniel could not understand the full meaning. The princess stepped forward, her voice strong but soft. She told her father about the attack, about the raiders who came for her, and about the human who saved her when all her guards had fallen. The king's eyes never left Daniel, and when she finished, silence filled the air. Finally, the king spoke, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. Through the princess's translation, the words cut into Daniel's heart. "You saved my daughter, so you owe us nothing," the king said. "But our law is clear. No man saves a princess without becoming part of the royal blood. You must marry her." Daniel's heart stopped. He had expected thanks, maybe a chance to return home. But marriage to an alien princess he barely knew, it was beyond anything he imagined. He looked at the princess, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She shook her head slightly, as if begging him not to answer too quickly. The hall filled with noise, voices of nobles and warriors rising. Some shouted for honor, some shouted against the idea. But all of them stared at Daniel, the stranger, the human who was now at the center of their ancient law. Daniel's hands clenched, his mind racing. He wanted to speak, to refuse, but he could feel the danger in the air. To say no in front of the king might mean dishonor, or even death. The king raised his hand, and silence fell again. His eyes burned with something beyond anger, belief, as if he was not just speaking law, but destiny. The princess stepped closer to Daniel, whispering in a language only he could hear, her voice trembling. "I do not want this, but if you refuse, he may kill you." Daniel felt the weight of her words crush him. He had risked his life to save her, and now he was trapped in chains of tradition. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw something else. Not only fear, but a strange connection, the same spark he felt when she first touched him in the desert. It confused him, frightened him, but also drew him closer. The king stood from his throne, his voice booming. "Tomorrow, the council will decide, and tomorrow you will give your answer." Daniel was led away by guards, into a chamber lit with blue fire. The princess followed, whispering urgently when the doors closed. "I do not want to be forced, but I feel safe with you," she said, her voice soft as starlight. Daniel looked at her, his mind torn between fear and something deeper. The world outside was alien, the people suspicious, the king a storm of power. And yet, standing here with the princess, he felt more alive than ever. That night, Daniel could not sleep. Through the window of his chamber, he saw the alien city glowing with golden lights. He heard music in the distance, voices chanting, but inside his heart was only silence. He had saved a princess, and now he stood at the edge of a destiny he did not understand. Somewhere deep in the palace, the king whispered with his council about prophecies. And somewhere even deeper, in shadows unseen, the raiders who had attacked the princess were already planning their next move. Daniel did not know it yet, but his choice tomorrow would not only change his life. It would change the fate of two worlds. Morning came with a red glow spreading across the alien sky. Daniel woke in his chamber, the golden walls reflecting the twin suns. He had not slept, his mind filled with questions, his body heavy with the weight of the king's words. The princess had left before dawn, and the guards outside his door had not spoken a single word. He felt like a prisoner, though he had committed no crime. Soon, the heavy doors opened, and soldiers in silver armor stepped inside. Their leader motioned for him to follow, his face stern, his weapon ready at his side. Daniel walked with them through long halls glowing with symbols that seemed to shift under his eyes. Every servant, every noble, every guard who saw him whispered. Some eyes were sharp with anger, others wide with fear. But none welcomed him. At last, the soldiers brought him into a great chamber filled with dozens of alien nobles. They sat in a circle around a raised platform, their robes shining in shades of blue and green. Above them hung banners painted with moons and suns, the royal crest glowing bright. At the center of the platform sat the king, his crown blazing with firelight. Beside him, the princess stood with her head bowed, her hands clenched tightly together. The chamber fell silent when Daniel entered. All eyes turned toward him, the human outsider. The king rose to his feet, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "My people, last night I told you of the human who saved my daughter," he said through the translator's tone. "It is the will of our law and the will of prophecy. You must marry the princess and join our royal blood." Gasps spread through the council, voices rising. Some shouted that this was madness. Others argued that prophecy must be respected. One noble cried out, "He is not of our world. How can he sit on our throne?" Another countered, "The prophecy spoke of a stranger from the stars. This human may be the one." The princess lifted her eyes, her voice soft but trembling. "Father, please, he has done enough. Do not force him to bear the weight of our law." But the king's face turned stern, his voice striking the chamber like thunder. "Silence, daughter. This is not only law. This is destiny. The blood of our kingdom cannot deny what is written." Daniel felt every eye pierce into him, his heart beating like a drum. He wanted to shout that he never asked for this, that he only wanted to survive and return home. But he also saw the princess's face, caught between fear and hope. And the memory of the raiders' voices returned to him, the words about a prophecy. Why they tried so hard to take her, why they feared what was to come. The king raised his hand, and the chamber grew silent once more. He stepped down from the throne, his tall figure towering above Daniel. His eyes burned with authority, but also with something deeper, belief. "You will marry her," the king declared, "and you will stand as protector of our line. Refuse, and you will bring dishonor upon yourself and death upon your name." The words struck Daniel like a blade. He was trapped, bound by a law he did not understand and a destiny he did not choose. The nobles whispered louder, the chamber filling with tension. The princess took a step toward him, her eyes pleading silently. She wanted him to live, but she also feared the future this marriage would bring. Daniel's fists clenched, his voice low but steady. "I came here by accident. I only wanted to survive. I saved her because it was right, not because I want a crown." His words echoed in the chamber, the translator's voice carrying them into alien ears. Some nobles gasped, others sneered, but the king's face remained carved in stone. "You speak as if choice is yours," the king said, his voice calm and dangerous. "But choice was taken from you the moment you touched the path of prophecy." He turned to the council, spreading his arms wide. "Tomorrow, we shall hold the binding ceremony. Let the stars witness our obedience to destiny." The nobles rose, some cheering, some furious, the sound shaking the chamber. The princess looked at Daniel, her lips whispering words only he could read. "I am sorry." Guards stepped forward, surrounding him, and he knew resistance would mean death. The king returned to his throne, his crown blazing brighter than before. Daniel was led away, his heart filled with storm. He had been a soldier, a survivor, a wanderer of worlds. But now he was something else, caught in the grip of ancient law and royal blood. Behind him, the king's voice still echoed in his ears, a demand that sounded less like law and more like fate. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, hidden in the shadows, the raiders prepared again. Their leader spoke with fury, his mask glowing red in the firelight. "The prophecy is moving forward, but we will not allow it to be fulfilled. The war was not over, it was only beginning." The night before the binding ceremony was heavy with silence. The golden palace glowed in the distance, its towers shining under the twin moons. But inside Daniel's chamber, the air was thick with doubt. He sat near the window, staring at the alien city below, where lights flickered like fireflies. He thought of home, of the sky he once knew, of the life that now felt like a dream slipping away. The door opened softly, and the princess entered, her robe flowing behind her like starlight. Her eyes searched the room until they found him, sitting in the shadows. She closed the door quickly, her voice low but urgent. "We do not have much time," she whispered. "My father believes the stars have already chosen, but I do not want to be bound by force." Daniel stood, his heart racing at her words. He saw fear in her eyes, but also something else, something warmer. She stepped closer, the glow of the moons lighting her lavender skin. "When you saved me, I felt different," she said softly, "safe, as if I had known you longer than a single night." Her voice trembled, but her words carried truth. Daniel struggled to find his own voice. "I never asked for this," he said. "I only wanted to survive. I saved you because it was right, not because I wanted to be a prince." The princess nodded quickly, her hands twisting in her robe. "I know. That is why I believe you. You are not here for power. You are not like the nobles who whisper of thrones." Her eyes softened, her voice falling into a whisper. "But if you refuse him, he will kill you, and I cannot let that happen." The room grew quiet, the sound of distant drums echoing through the city. Daniel stepped closer, his breath unsteady. He wanted to tell her that he would fight, that he would not bend to fate. But when he looked into her glowing eyes, his words broke apart. For the first time, he felt a strange pull, not from duty, not from law, but from her. The princess reached out, her hand brushing against his. The touch sent a wave of warmth through him. Her lips parted, her voice gentle. "If there was no law, no prophecy, would you still stand beside me?" she asked. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tight. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he said, "but tonight, yes, I would stand with you." Before either of them could say more, the chamber door shook. A guard burst inside, his face pale, his voice panicked. "My lady, the raiders have returned. They are at the city gates." The princess gasped, her hand pulling away. Daniel grabbed the fallen guard's weapon once more. His body moved on instinct, just as it had in the desert. The palace shook with the sound of war horns. Outside, the city burned as shadows stormed through the streets. The raiders moved like a tide, their weapons blazing red against the night. From the balcony, Daniel saw chaos spreading fast. The people screamed, the soldiers clashed, and the banners of the kingdom trembled in the smoke. The princess gripped his arm, her eyes fierce. "They are here for me again. They will not stop until prophecy is broken," she said. Daniel tightened his hold on the weapon, his voice firm. "Then they'll have to go through me." The two of them ran through the palace halls, the sound of battle growing louder. Alien soldiers clashed with raiders, their blades of light cutting through the air. Daniel fought alongside them, his movements sharp, his heart fueled by fire. Every strike was for survival, but every strike was also for her. The princess stayed close, guiding him through passages, her voice steady even in the chaos. Finally, they reached the inner garden of the palace. The night air was thick with smoke, the twin moons hidden behind dark clouds. And there, waiting among the burning trees, stood the leader of the raiders. His mask glowed with crimson light, his voice deep and cruel. "The prophecy must not be fulfilled," he roared. "The human must die, and the princess must be taken." Daniel raised his weapon, his body tense. The princess stepped beside him, her voice trembling but strong. "You cannot have me, not while he stands here." The raider leader laughed, the sound cold as iron. "Then both of you shall fall tonight." The clash that followed was fierce. Daniel fought with every ounce of strength, his arms heavy, his breath burning. The raider leader was faster, stronger, his blade cutting sparks into the night. But Daniel refused to give in, each strike powered by a promise he could not yet name. Beside him, the princess called out, her voice a guide in the storm. "Stand, Daniel. Do not let him win." The battle raged until soldiers arrived, their golden armor flashing through the smoke. The raiders were forced back, retreating into the shadows once more. But as they fled, their leader shouted one last warning. "This is not the end. Human, prophecy is death, not destiny." The princess fell against Daniel, her body trembling, her eyes filled with fear and relief. He caught her, holding her close, his chest rising and falling like a storm. The city burned around them, the palace shook, but for a moment, all that existed was the bond between them. A bond that was no longer just about duty. It was something deeper, something dangerous, something that neither of them could deny. The city was still burning when the suns rose the next morning. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying with it the cries of the people and the echo of battle. Daniel stood on the palace balcony, his hands gripping the railing, his eyes fixed on the ruins below. The raiders had come again, stronger, bolder, and their leader's words still burned in his mind. "This is not destiny. This is death." Behind him, the princess entered the chamber, her robe singed from the fire, her face pale with exhaustion. Yet even in her weakness, her presence carried strength. Her eyes found Daniel's back, and for a moment she did not speak. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft but heavy with fear. "They will come again, you know this. They will never stop until prophecy is broken." Daniel turned, his jaw tight. "I don't even understand this prophecy," he said. "Why does it matter so much? Why do they want you, and why do they want me dead?" The princess lowered her gaze, her hands trembling as she held the edge of her robe. "There are words written in our oldest temple," she whispered. "Words that speak of a stranger from the stars, one who will unite our kingdom and change the fate of the galaxy." She looked at him then, her eyes glowing faintly in the morning light. "My father believes you are that stranger." Daniel shook his head, his chest tightening. "I'm no savior. I'm just a man who crashed on the wrong world," he said. But even as he spoke, he remembered the way the raiders had shouted, their fury at the thought of the prophecy being fulfilled. They believed it too, and their fear gave his heart a strange unease. The sound of armored boots filled the hall, and the king entered, his crown blazing in the sunlight. Around him walked his council, their faces drawn with anger and fear. When the king's eyes landed on Daniel, his voice thundered through the chamber. "You see what has happened," he roared. "The raiders grow bold. They come for my daughter, for our blood. Only the binding can protect us." The princess stepped forward quickly, her voice trembling. "Father, please, forcing him will not bring peace. It will only bring more war." But the king silenced her with a sharp look, his voice turning darker. "This is no longer about choice. It is survival. The raiders will not stop. Prophecy cannot be denied." Daniel clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the king's words crush him. He looked around the hall, seeing the nobles whisper, their eyes fixed on him. He could feel the fear in the air, the desperation of a people clinging to prophecy as their last hope. But deep inside, he also felt something else. Not just fear, not just confusion, but a growing fire, a bond he could not deny with the princess who now stood trembling beside him. Suddenly, a horn sounded in the distance, long and sharp. The soldiers in the hall froze, the king's eyes widened. Another horn followed, then another, until the air was filled with the call of alarm. A messenger burst into the chamber, his armor cracked, his face covered in blood and ash. "They're here," he gasped, falling to his knees. "The raiders, they're inside the city." The king's fury erupted, his voice shaking the walls. "Prepare the defenses, protect the princess at all costs." The nobles scattered, the soldiers rushed to their posts. But Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding with dread. This attack was different, larger, more dangerous. The raiders had not come to frighten. They had come to end everything. The princess grabbed his arm, her voice sharp with urgency. "They will come straight for me. If they take me, they will end the prophecy before it begins." Daniel met her eyes, his voice steady despite the storm within. "Then we don't let them take you." The palace shook as explosions ripped through its outer walls. The golden halls cracked, banners fell, and smoke poured in like a living shadow. Through the broken doors, raiders surged, their weapons glowing red, their voices shouting in fury. Daniel fought at the princess's side, every strike of his blade cutting through the chaos. The guards fought bravely, but the raiders were relentless, their leader's shadow looming ever closer. In the heart of the palace, near the sacred chamber of the throne, the raider leader appeared again. His mask glowed with crimson fire, his voice filled with rage. "The human dies tonight, and the princess comes with us." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between the princess and the raider's blade. His chest heaving, his weapon glowing. "You'll have to go through me first." The clash shook the chamber, sparks flying as steel and light collided. The raider leader struck with fury, each blow heavier than the last. Daniel staggered, his muscles burning, but he refused to fall. The princess cried out, her voice echoing through the smoke. "Stand, Daniel, you cannot fall now." Their battle raged while the palace burned. Outside, the city screamed, the people ran, and the prophecy hung like a shadow over every heart. And deep within Daniel, something began to awaken, a strength he had never felt before, a fire that whispered of destiny, of a path he had not chosen but could no longer deny. The raider leader pushed him to the ground, his blade raised for the final strike. But Daniel rolled, his weapon flaring with sudden light. He struck back, the energy of the blow sending the raider staggering. The leader roared, his mask cracking, his fury shaking the chamber. "This is not destiny, human. This is war." The battle was not over. The prophecy was not finished. But as Daniel stood beside the princess, their eyes locked. Both of them knew, whatever tomorrow brought, their bond had already begun to change everything. The palace was a ruin of fire and smoke. Shattered walls bled dust into the sky, and fallen banners burned across the marble floors. Daniel leaned against a cracked column, his chest rising and falling like a storm. Beside him, the princess stood with her robes torn and her eyes wide with fear. The raiders had retreated, but their warnings still echoed in the air. This is not destiny. This is war. When the last flames were put out, the king summoned his council. The great hall was filled again, though its ceiling now carried scars of battle. Nobles whispered nervously, their eyes flicking between the human and the princess. Every word carried both fear and curiosity. Some spoke of Daniel as a curse, others as salvation. But all of them knew one thing. The prophecy could no longer be ignored. The king rose from his throne, his crown cracked but still glowing. His voice thundered like rolling fire. "For centuries we have hidden the words of the prophecy, fearing the day they would come true. But now, with my daughter's life saved twice by this human, we cannot remain silent." The chamber grew silent, the nobles leaning forward as the king raised his hand. Priests in silver robes stepped into the hall, carrying a stone tablet older than the palace itself. The carvings glowed faintly, symbols that twisted like living fire. The priests placed it before the throne, and the king spoke. From the stars shall come a stranger, neither of our blood nor our world. He shall guard the royal line, unite the broken lands, and stand at the edge of war to decide the fate of two worlds. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The words felt heavy, like chains pressing against his chest. He shook his head slowly, his voice low. I am no savior. I'm just a soldier who survived a crash. But the king's eyes burned with belief, his voice sharp. Do you think prophecy asks for permission? It does not matter what you want. It matters what the stars demand. The princess stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. Father, prophecy is not a prison. Destiny should not be forced. It should be chosen. The king turned his gaze on her, his voice cutting like steel. You speak of choice while raiders burn our city. Would you let your people fall because you fear what is written? The council erupted in shouts. Some demanded the binding ceremony at once, others begged for patience. But in the chaos, Daniel stood frozen, the words of the prophecy echoing in his mind. Guard the royal line, unite the broken lands, decide the fate of two worlds. He did not want this, yet deep inside, he felt the fire of the battle still burning, a fire that whispered he was already walking the path the prophecy had spoken. Later that night, the princess led him to a hidden chamber deep below the palace. Torches flickered against walls carved with stars. In the center stood an ancient crystal, its light pulsing softly like a heartbeat. This is where the prophecy was first written, she whispered. Our ancestors left these words, and some believe they were only a story, until now. Daniel stepped closer, the crystal's glow reflecting in his eyes. Symbols shifted across its surface, forming shapes that looked almost human. He raised his hand without thinking, and when his fingers touched the surface, the crystal flared with light. The chamber filled with whispers, voices older than memory. The princess gasped, her eyes wide. It responds to you, she whispered, only to you. Daniel pulled his hand back, his heart racing. This doesn't make sense, he said. I never asked for this. I never wanted it. The princess looked at him, her voice soft but steady. Maybe destiny doesn't ask what we want. Maybe it chooses those who carry the strength to bear it. For a long moment, the two stood in silence. The glow of the crystal bathed them both. Daniel's eyes locked with hers, and in that quiet, he realized the bond between them was no longer just survival. It was deeper, stronger, something that prophecy itself could not explain. Above them, the sound of horns shook the palace once again. The king's voice echoed through the halls, calling his people to arms. The raiders had not vanished. They were gathering stronger forces at the edge of the kingdom. The war was not tomorrow. It was already here. Daniel clenched his fists, his mind torn. He wanted freedom. He wanted to walk away from destiny. But the look in the princess's eyes, the cries of the people above, and the fire burning in his chest told him one thing. He was already part of this story, and no matter how much he resisted, the secret of the prophecy had chosen him. The palace bells rang through the dawn, their deep sound shaking the air like thunder. The binding ceremony was set to begin. The council had gathered, and the city waited in silence. Outside, the smoke of yesterday's battle still hung over the golden towers. But inside the great hall, every eye turned toward the human who had become the center of prophecy. Daniel stood at the edge of the chamber, his body tense, his heart heavy. Beside him, the princess walked slowly, her head lowered, her hands folded tightly together. Her steps echoed on the polished floor, each one pulling her closer to a fate she did not choose. At the far end, the king sat on his throne, his crown blazing brighter than the morning suns. His eyes burned with authority and belief, his voice cutting through the silence. Today we seal destiny, the king declared. Today we bind human and royal blood. and the prophecy will be fulfilled. The nobles cheered, though some voices carried doubt. The priests raised their staffs, chanting words that made the air hum with strange power. But Daniel did not move, his fists clenched, his eyes fixed on the princess. He saw the fear in her gaze, the weight of duty pressing against her shoulders. And in that moment, he knew he could not stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice strong. "I saved her because it was right, not because I wanted a crown," he said. "I will not be forced into this, not by law, not by prophecy." The chamber erupted in gasps. The king rose to his feet, fury burning across his face. "You dare defy the will of the stars," he roared. "You spit upon our law, our blood, our destiny." The soldiers moved quickly, their weapons raised, but the princess cried out, stepping between Daniel and the guards. Her voice trembled, but carried the weight of truth. "Father, if destiny is real, then it does not need chains, it does not need force, it will happen because it must." The king froze, his eyes narrowing, his hands tightening around his throne. Whispers spread through the nobles, some agreeing, others demanding punishment. The air crackled with tension, the choice hanging like a blade above them all. Then a horn sounded from the outer walls, long and broken. A messenger ran into the chamber, his armor scorched, his voice desperate. "The raiders, they're here, not at our gates, but inside our walls. Their army has breached the city." Chaos erupted. Nobles screamed. Guards rushed toward the exits. The king's fury shifted into dread. His voice thundered. "To arms, defend the palace." Daniel felt the fire surge within him, his choice no longer just about marriage or law. It was about survival, about protecting the people, about standing beside the princess who had placed her trust in him. He turned to her, his eyes steady. "Stay with me, no matter what happens." Her hand found his, her voice soft but certain. "I will not leave your side." The raiders poured into the palace like a storm of shadows. Their leader strode at the front, his mask glowing red, his voice filled with rage. "Prophecy ends tonight. The human dies. The princess belongs to us." Daniel raised his weapon, his body alive with a strength he did not fully understand. The battle raged through the great hall, blades of light clashing, fire erupting across the marble floor. The king fought beside his guards, his crown blazing as he struck down raiders. The princess stood with Daniel, her voice guiding him, her courage stronger than fear. In the chaos, the raider leader clashed with Daniel once more. Their blades collided, sparks raining down like stars. "You are not destiny," the raider spat. "You are nothing but a man." Daniel gritted his teeth, his voice rising like thunder. "Maybe I'm just a man, but I stand for her, and I stand for what is right." With a final strike, Daniel's blade cut through the raider's weapon, shattering it into shards of light. The leader fell back, his mask cracked, his fury turning into fear. He shouted to his warriors, and they fled into the smoke, leaving the palace scarred but still standing. Silence followed, broken only by the heavy breaths of survivors. The king looked at Daniel, his face torn between pride and anger. "You defied me, but you saved us," the king said, his voice softer than before. The nobles watched in awe. The priests bowed their heads. The prophecy was no longer just words. It was alive in the man who stood before them. Daniel turned to the princess, her hand still holding his, her eyes shining with relief and something deeper. He spoke quietly, only for her. "I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. I will fight for you, not because of prophecy, but because it is my choice." Her lips trembled into a smile, tears glimmering in her eyes. And in that moment, the fate of two worlds began to change, not by force, not by law, but by the bond of two hearts.